Hey everybody, Timmy Flyersguy here. Do you like hockey podcasts? Do you like watching hockey podcasts? Do you love hockey? Well, if you love the Timmy Flyersguy podcast, I suggest you check out Tim and the Crease podcast, a podcast about Islanders hockey. Kim is a very passionate fan in Long Island who loves her Islanders. In her podcast, she talks about Isles hockey and many other things as well. Kim McCrease also is known as Isles Girl 3. So if you're in the mood for some good Islanders hockey and a good podcast about Isles hockey, then I suggest you check out the Kim and the Crease podcast. Podcast about Islanders hockey, starring Isles Girl 3 on YouTube. Check her out. Her YouTube channel is Isles Girl 3. Hey everybody, are you looking for a wrestling show with attitude? Are you looking for a wrestling show that'll get you hooked? Well, I suggest you check it out. GTS Wrestling on YouTube, hosted by the leader of DF, Grim of Grimm's Toy Show. GTS Wrestling is on Grimm's Toy Show. So what the hell are you waiting for? Are you waiting for somebody else to make a better wrestling show? Well, it's not going to happen because GTS is one of the best wrestling shows on YouTube. What the hell are you waiting for? Subscribe to GTS Wrestling on YouTube. Go to Grimm's Toy Show to check out all the action of GTS Wrestling. Only on YouTube. Eat it, yeah!
And now, our feature presentation.
What's up, Philly? We're the gang from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Let's go Flyers!
Hey everybody, it's me, Timmy Flyersguy, and welcome to this week's edition of Classic Flyers Theater. I'm your host, Timmy Flyersguy. In today's episode, we take a look back at one of the greatest Philadelphia Flyers of all time, and that is Bobby Clarke. We're going to take a look back at his outstanding career as a hockey player and the outstanding career as a Philadelphia Flyer as well. So we're going to take a look back at a special on A&E called Legends of Hockey, which was a biography special about the many legends of hockey. And I found this video about Bobby Clarke, and it's a biography about it's the biography about Bobby Clarke's life. In my opinion, Bobby Clarke was the heart of this Philadelphia Flyers team. Back during the Broad Street Bully era, Bobby Clarke had so many great years with the Philadelphia Flyers. In 1984, he officially retired as a Philadelphia Flyer. And he also became Flyers general manager at one time. Bobby Clarke was one of the best Philadelphia Flyers players out there. He could get under your skin, and he could score goals. So, without further ado, we're going to take a look back at Legends of Hockey, Bobby Clarke.
When the balance of the century had tipped its final 50 years, the National Hockey League enjoyed a new, exciting golden age for almost 20 years. Peace and prosperity delivered a stability that in all its long history, hockey had seldom known. 6 teams, the original 6, were the potent symbols of the game. The Blackhawks, the Rangers, the Canadiens, the Bruins, the Maple Leafs, the Red Wings. And almost from birth, young men would be raised, devoted to one or the other, bonded with a religious fervor that knew no bounds. This was a time of the Titans and of the great dynasties that, battling, rose and held the stage, then clashed and fought for glory to avoid the fall. The toughest men on ice, our heroes, our legends.
I always left that dressing room with the idea that, there's only one thing to do in sport, and that's win.
If you learn to play a little rough and shade the rules a little bit, sometimes you get a little more respect. And respect gives you a little more room.
You would give them something, but you wouldn't give them what they really wanted. So it became a mental chess game type of thing.
If you got a breakaway and you start to think about what you're going to do, you're not going to score. It's got to become natural, I guess. You don't think about anything and suddenly the puck is in.
I said to myself, Boom, you cannot miss. You have to score a goal. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? Should I dig him or give him a slap shot? Everybody thought I was going to slap the puck. The closer I was coming, he came out of the net. I says, he's dead.
You're on top of the mountain. That's when your game is on a high. And you know it doesn't matter what. That puck is going there. It doesn't matter who's what. And he goes through it, and he goes through like slow motion.
Peter was trying to go through two defensemen, and the puck just laid there, and I just grab it and shoot it, and I score my first goal.
7 or 8 minutes left in the third period, I think, and we were down by 1, and I just slapped the puck at the net, and it ended up going in. So, I mean, you're trying to score, but I was surprised too, I think.
It was something that weighed for me. I jumped up in the air. I was so excited. I forgot to put my feet down when I landed, and I fell on my face. But I had a smile from ear to ear. I mean, it was something I'll always remember.
I was jumping like a crazy guy on the air, jumping, my glove off, and every rocket came, and he congratulated me and all the guys. Biggest thrill of my life.
1967 was a turning point for professional hockey. The National Hockey League doubled in size. For many, the good old days of a simple 6-team era were counted out with regret. And yet the new expanded league meant opportunity. Opportunity for more talented young players, as well as for the fans of the fastest game on earth, that now was truly catching on across the continent. The trend to a bigger league would be consolidated with a further influx of teams to the fold before the century's end. Now, in a growing number of communities, hockey history, youthful tradition, was being forged. The glory of the game was growing. New legends were in the making.
I always remember this rink because we had a Christmas tree or a fir tree right in the center of it, and when we were going end to end, which is maybe 40, 50 feet, you had to deke the tree as well as trying to deke your brother. My father had tremendous passion for the game. He also had a great understanding of the game, and for a number of years, like from Pee Wee up through midget, he coached the team that I played on. I remember, time and time again that we'd be sitting at the kitchen table, and we'd have salt and pepper shakers and ketchup bottles and mustard things, and he'd be using these items to show us angles, plays, things like that. So his passion for the game, that scenario at the kitchen table was very, very strong in helping me to analyze a game, or analyze what works, what doesn't work, why it works, and break down the game.
While playing for the junior Marlboros in Toronto, Brad Park would successfully put his father's kitchen table coaching into practice. Always an eager apprentice and a quick study, Park honed his defensive abilities, and his hard work paid off. In 1966, he was drafted #1 by the New York Rangers.
It was great in a sense for hockey, because the Rangers and Bruins were 5th and 6th place for a couple of years, the two worst teams that's always finished out of the playoffs. So by the Bruins adding Bobby Orr and the Rangers adding Brad Park, that brought them some respectability. And also Brad Park was the second best defenseman in the NHL for a great number of years, which is no insult when you think that Bobby Orr was the first.
I've been playing in New York for a couple months, and I've been waiting to get my first goal. And it was starting to wear on me. We're playing the Boston Bruins in New York. Eddie Johnson's the goaltender. And we're running away with the game. And I got the clinching goal. We beat them 9-0, and I get the 9th goal. And it was a slap shot from the point, went off the post, it was perfect. In those years, you never developed friendships with the other teams. You didn't want to know the other teams. You didn't want to go to the All-Star game. You didn't want to associate.
For 7.5 seasons, Brad Park had shone with the Rangers, but in a huge 1975 trade, he and Jean Rattel were traded to their arch rivals, Boston, where Park would inevitably be compared to the great Bobby Orr.
Park had either the fortune or the misfortune to be playing the same time Bobby Orr did, and nobody was as good as Bobby Orr, in my opinion, but certainly Park was one of the top defensemen through those years, and he was a great passer and very intelligent hockey player. He was one of the first that I recalled who could take the puck, and he did it for his whole career better than just about anybody. Maybe Dennis Potvin did the same, and they'd start going back towards their own end. They'd pull the darn forwards, and then they were such good passers at one pass, and they'd be, all of a sudden they got a 3-2 going the other way, and Park would do that so well, and he could join the rush, he was big, like real thick man. If he hit you, he hurt you.
One of the nicest playmakers. I mean, he did his little dipsy-do with his head, and he always knew what was going on. One of the best point man on the power play, and really came into his own when he joined Boston. He just kind of fit into their style and did a lot of great things when he was with Boston. And you're talking about a guy that had maybe 80% of his knees gone.
Brad was usually the talk of the meeting. You knew he controlled the puck. We knew his knees were not the best knees, but had an excellent shot on that point. Type of guy that can control the game. Go one-on-one against him was a challenge.
There was a lot to the game, trying to control people. Positionally, when they're coming, whether it's a 1-on-1 or 2-on-1, 3-on-2, what do you want them to do? Where do you want them to move the puck? When do you want them to move it? That's, as a defenseman, those are things that you tried to control through the center ice. You would give them something, but you wouldn't give them what they really wanted. So it became a mental chess game type of thing.
He had the great timing where he'd always edge you off towards the corner, and when you shot, you were against the boards, and you wondered, well, where did I go wrong here? And you understood why he was an all-star.
Despite a great 17-year career playing in the National Hockey League, Brad Park never managed his name on the Stanley Cup. But today, he has few regrets.
I have 4 boys and a daughter, and that's the part of my life that goes on. the part of hockey, you can only play so long. And I didn't win a Stanley Cup. Hey, I would have loved to. It wasn't there. It wasn't in the cards.
I got diabetes when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and it required insulin shots every day and watching your diet and stuff. But the doctor never said I couldn't play hockey. And I mean, I took insulin so I could live. It wasn't that I wanted it or nothing. And people assumed that because I had diabetes that I wouldn't be strong enough to play at the National League level. I wouldn't have the stamina. But the reality is, if you could play junior hockey in Flin Flon, you could play in the NHL.
As a feisty young boy growing up in Flin Flon, Manitoba, Bobby Clarke couldn't wait for the winter chill to come and freeze the ponds.
When you played on the outdoor ice, you'd have every age of kid going, and you might have 5 on each team or 10 on each team, and the game was just who could keep the puck the longest, you know. And in Flin Flon, of course, with the snow and everything, guys are getting knocked over the boards into the snow and fighting, and there was no adult supervision or anything, so it was terrific. And you just learned to play hockey that way. I think I was around 10 or 11 when we got television up there, and they called it that time CAN TV, and we used to get the hockey games a week late. So you knew who scored and what the score was, but you hadn't seen the game.
With the Flin Flon Bombers, Bobby Clarke led the league with 137 points. However, the NHL clubs were still nervous about Clarke's diabetes. But in 1969, he was drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers.
I remember going to Detroit and for the first time, and you look across, and I was in the starting lineup. There's myself, Reggie Fleming, and Lou Morrison for the Flyers, and they're starting Gordie Howe, Alex Delvecchio, and Frank Mahovlich. I think we're in a little trouble that night. But, you know, you get through it all. You learn from it.
Through the 70s, the Philadelphia Flyers had a team that were called the Broad Street Bullies. But going into the spectrum, I think most players who were on visiting teams coming in were very concerned. I mean, you knew you were in a situation where they were like almost like a pack of wolves together. They were going to intimidate you, they were going to test you, they were going to fight you, they were going to whatever.
There's a hate involved. There has to be. They're trying to beat you, and it's very physical and nasty. And in those days, I mean, they felt the same about me as I did about them, I think.
I can remember Bobby Clarke. I see those pictures of him grinning with the no teeth in front, and you know, he would, when everything settled down and all the fighting was out of the way and all that other stuff, Bobby Clarke was the guy that led that team.
I loved to get on the ice, I loved to practice, and I loved to play, and the rest of the time I wasn't that good at anything really or anything else, but playing and practicing and stuff, that's what I loved to do. So I could at least demand from other people that they work hard, because I would always be able to do that. I never analyzed leadership. I know I was captain of the club, and I know I've been given credit for it, but I've never really tried to analyze myself either. I think the one thing that allows a person to be a leader is the people you are working for allow you to have some authority and allow you to have the freedom to make decisions. Many captains are never given any authority to make any decisions. In Philadelphia, I was able to make a lot of decisions because Fred Shiro, Mr. Snyder, Mr. Allen, they allowed me to. And those decisions that I made weren't always right, but they were always meant to try and help the club win games. As far as individual leadership, I don't know. I just went by the ass of my pants.
He had a luxury of playing at the time with a very tough team that completely suited his style of play and drove other players to play bigger, tougher, stronger than they probably were, and wouldn't let them ever relax to the point where it may cost them a game. When you have that kind of determination, you've got a winner, and he certainly was a winner.
Bobby Clarke was the first expansion team player to reach 100 points, and he went on to win the Hart Trophy 3 times. In 1974 against Boston, his brilliant 3 goals in the second game of the Stanley Cup Finals evened the series. And against the odds, the Flyers went on to take the cup for the first time.
To win the Stanley Cup, I don't know if I have the vocabulary to articulate my own feelings on it. There's obviously, there's a little bit of relief. I've finally done it. And there's the ecstasy that comes with knowing it. For a short period of time, you're the best in the world. And there's this real wonderful feeling of being part of a group of men who had a goal, and everybody contributed and everybody worked hard for a lot of years for most of us. And then you accomplish that goal.
I was in grade 8 in the little public school in St. Jacobs, and the principal had an interview with each one of the students as we were leaving to go on to high school, and he asked me to fill in 3 things on what I wanted to do with my life as a career. The first thing I put was to play in the National Hockey League. The second thing was to be a crane operator, because that's what my father did. The third thing, I didn't know what to fill in, and I didn't fill it in. He was saying to me, he said, "Darryl, do you realize how few players make it to the National Hockey League? There's 6 teams, you know. I mean, you better think, twice about this, because the chances of you doing it are going to be very small." And I still remember that, walking out of that, and there was a feeling, I appreciated what he was telling me, but the other side of it was like, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do everything I can to do it. In '70, I was building swimming pools in London. It was a Saturday. We were finishing a job, driving an old stake truck with all the shovels and crap on the back of the stake truck, and I had this old radio, and it came across on the air the draft, and that I had been drafted by the Leafs. So that's the first I'd heard of it, and which was a little ironic, because as a youngster growing up in St. Jacobs, I was always a Montreal Canadiens fan. They were my team. I liked Jean Beliveau. He was my favorite player and idol, and the Canadiens, I loved the way they played. And my dad and my brothers were Leaf fans, so here I am now a Leaf, and obviously switched my allegiances quickly.
When Darryl Sittler reported for duty at the Maple Leafs dressing room in 1970, a surprise was in store. He was handed a jersey with the famous number 27.
There was obviously a special feeling that went through me to think that, I knew Frank Mahovlich, and what he meant to the Leafs, and the great player he was, and for them to offer me that and give me that sweater, I realized that certainly they thought a lot of me as a draft pick, but I also felt that there was a certain responsibility that came with that, and I wanted to fill the big shoes of Frank Mahovlich.
Darryl was the type of player that would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself. First, he wasn't a great skater, but he was a good skater. He could stick handle like crazy. He could play it tough if he needed to, and by playing it tough, I mean body checking. He wasn't afraid of the corners or the tough physical work along the boards. And if he had to drop the gloves, he could drop the gloves too, and he was a pretty good fighter.
He was a really talented player. Like, he could really shoot it and skate, and on top of that, he was really fierce on the ice. Whatever game you wanted to play, he was able to play it, and play it at a very high level.
I remember the night that, watching on TV, the night that Darryl scored the 6 goals and 4 assists against Boston, and I was as excited for him as anybody else. I was, you like to see guys do well.
And that was a special night. Why it happened, I don't know. I mean, just everything fell into place. I don't think I was any better player than anybody else back then, but for some reason, it all came together that one night and ended up in the scorebook.
For Darryl Sittler, hard work paid off. The leading scorer in the Leafs' history. The first to notch 100 points in one season. And all during difficult years at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Myself and a few other players were in an unfortunate environment through those turbulent days of Harold Ballard and Punch Imlach through the 70s, and I felt not only disappointed or for Leaf players who had gone through it, but for the Leaf organization in general, because they had had such great tradition, and there was a period where the Leafs went through where there were players that wanted to get out of Toronto, didn't want to play for them. There were draft picks who didn't want to be drafted by Toronto, and that should never have happened.
Yet despite all the problems and heartbreak he experienced, Darryl Sittler remains loyal to his old club.
I've always felt that I was a Leaf. You know, I think the fans recognize me as a Leaf because of the things that happened to me as a Leaf. You know, and to come back into the organization in the last 5 years, working with Cliff Fletcher and Bill Waters and the rest of them, has been a great opportunity for me and something that I've certainly enjoyed and proud to be a part of.
The friendship that I had with and still have with Darryl is something that I'll always cherish. You know, you could go into any battle with, whether it be on the ice or off the ice or in life period. Toronto was my favorite team. I always dreamed of playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and to have that opportunity come true really was more than I could have ever asked for.
Born in Alberta, Lanny McDonald was a Toronto fan from birth. When he finally arrived at Maple Leaf Gardens in 1973, it was as if fate had put him there.
It was one of the best feelings I ever had. I was sitting up in the stands, and the light was coming through the exits, and all the rest of the building was dark. And it's a memory that will be forever etched in my mind because it was in some ways eerie, but just the greatest feeling you could ever imagine.
You were 20 years old when he was a rookie in the NHL, not 18 like some of the players nowadays. And he struggled for 2.5 seasons. In year number 3, there were still some serious doubts and questions if Lanny McDonald could play at the NHL level. And then whatever happened, everything clicked for him, and he became a superstar and a model of consistency and a model of class off the ice.
I had it, I just couldn't find it. And finally in the third year, really everything coming together and thinking, thank goodness that perseverance paid off.
You play against Lanny McDonald, you know you're up for a challenge every night. I mean, he can score goals. I mean, that, obviously people recognize him for that, but he can also drop his shoulder down and hit guys, very competitive along the boards. And a guy, as a player playing on a line with you, knew that he was going to show up every night. Lanny was traded to Colorado when he was. It was a very emotional time for me as a player to lose a friend and a line mate. Even though they moved away, I look at it a number of years later, we're still, it's one of those relationships where you might not see each other for a month or 2 or even 6 months, but when you're back together, you kind of just pick it up where it's left off.
After 2 seasons with Colorado, Lanny McDonald was back in his old Alberta stomping grounds with the Calgary Flames. In all, Lanny would inspire the Flames for 8 seasons. But it was during his last match ever, in the Forum, in Montreal, in the Stanley Cup Final, that he had his greatest moment. Lanny's goal was to put the Flames ahead. The Stanley Cup would be theirs.
If I wanted to lose, and I hate losing, but if there was one person I didn't mind losing to, it was Lanny the year that they beat us in the Stanley Cup Final, because this is a guy that, you know, played his heart out, and I think that the Leafs lost a lot of their heart the year that they traded Lanny away. And Toronto's loss was Calgary's gain.
When he won the cup, or the Calgary won the cup, and I saw him lifted up in the pictures and the emotion, I mean, I had a tear in my eye. But the fact that it ended up like a storybook, he got his 500th goal, his 1000th point, I think his 1000th game, all in the same year, and then to top it off by winning the Stanley Cup. It couldn't have happened to a more appropriate person.
Well, it was storybook, and you know, it's sad that everyone doesn't have the opportunity to not only win a Stanley Cup, but win it in your last year. It was such a nice way to end it all. You score your first goal in Montreal, you score your last goal in Montreal, and you win the Stanley Cup, and you say, see you later, it has been a slice, and it really was.
If you got a breakaway and you start to think about what you're going to do, you're not going to score. It's got to become natural, I guess. You don't think about anything and suddenly the puck is in. was always hockey. You know, that was probably the only sport we were thinking about. And I remember one time during a Christmas Day, I had a pair of skate as a gift, you know, from my mom and dad. And at 5 o'clock, I was on the 5 o'clock in the morning. I was on the ice, you know. So, and we used to wear our skate on the street to go at the ice rink. So, I guess we were born with a pair of skate.
From an early age, Gilbert was outstanding. His skating, stick handling, and scoring superb. As a teenager, he played with the junior Canadians. But the spin of a roulette wheel in the 1970 expansion draft gave coach Punch Imlach first pick. Gilbert Perreault was on his way to the Buffalo Sabres.
When I show up in Buffalo, I mean, Punch was there and he told me, he said, we want you here to score goals and to put the show on. So that's what I did. I scored 38 goals that year and I had a pretty good season.
I saw this guy coming down the ice. I mean, his feet were 15 feet apart, and he's pulling all these moves in between the legs of guys, and just, I mean, probably one of the most beautiful skaters that you'll ever see put on a pair of skates. And he was just a nightmare to play against because he was so explosive. If you got caught flat-footed, I mean, there was nothing more scary than having this guy come down full speed on you, and you're standing there. You know, not only was he fast, he was big, he was strong.
This was a guy that was a talented, scary player. He had maybe the best skater there was, as good a skater as there was probably in the NHL. Incredible moves when he came down at you, and some real pizzazz. The French connection, like him and Richard Martin and René Robert in Buffalo. This was an expansion team that quickly became not just a respectable team, but really an exciting team.
Well, he was an elegant player. He wasn't physical, but he had great speed and great moves, and almost like what you think of as a French Canadian, the great French Canadian player, you know, flying down the ice and shooting the puck or passing the puck. And you knew if you were going to stop him, it was going to have to be through physical play because you certainly weren't going to skate with him.
One-on-one, he was unstoppable. In 1971, he won Rookie of the Year award and went on to star with the Sabres for 17 seasons. At the center of the Buffalo's dreaded French Connection line, Gilbert Perreault lived up to his top billing.
It gave me a good experience in life. You learn fast, and I don't regret anything. Just had some very good years with the Sabres, and was always be proud to be a Sabre.
I played in the Pee Wee tournament where famous Guy Lafleur played. Gilbert Perreault at the time and myself, we basically dominated minor hockey within our areas. Gilbert Perreault was in Victoriaville, I was in Drummondville, and Guy Lafleur was in Thurso. So when there was tournaments, we all played against each other. It was amazing.
Like his young colleagues in the Quebec Pee Wee leagues, Marcel Dionne was already a big star, but in a small pond. He was selected second overall in the 71 amateur draft by Detroit. Now he realized that things were a bit different in the NHL.
There's a life. Now you make a living at this. Before you're playing for fun and enjoy it, go to school, hey, you're the big hero. Now, they scream at you. I was not ready for that. What do you mean? I'm just the guy from St. Catharines, from Drummondville. What do you scream at me for? Well, I'll tell you, you understand real quick now, it's pressure time. My first game in the NHL, it's when I'm in the starting lineup, I'm standing at the blue line, and that hit. That really hit, man. That's it now. This is for real. There is no way out. I'm here. I'm playing. I'm supposed to stay here. Now it's a question, how long? How well are you going to play? So, but you take one day at a time.
But despite his 4 years as a shining star, Marcel Dionne and Detroit management never saw eye to eye. He went west to the Los Angeles Kings. It was in the California sun that Marcel Dion would win his second Lady Byng trophy and become the league's top scorer in 1980. They called him the Little Beaver.
If you're a great player, somehow you've got to figure out how to get your team to win, and he did that. Actually, they didn't win cups, but they had seasons where the team had over 100 points and where they were good in the playoffs.
Marcel played with the Triple Crown line, Dave Taylor and Charlie Simmer, a line that at the time was the highest scoring line in NHL history.
What those two players did for me is just added an element that despite not winning a Stanley Cup and championships, they made the game so much easier. They made the game that the way it's supposed to be played. They came to play every night, and we just mixed and blended so well together.
Unfortunately, I don't think Marcel has been given the credit he deserves for the career he had, and probably because he played in Los Angeles. Played on teams that were not always real successful, were not high-profile teams, were not well-respected teams around the country. And yet Marcel, third leading goal scorer of all time, never really got that kind of recognition.
Had he come out of junior and dropped into Montreal, being a French Canadian, and with all his talent and stuff, he might have been considered in the same place as Lafleur is. He was a terrific, talented player.
The only reason I would have loved to play for the Montreal Canadiens, it's because they played exactly my style of hockey. It was give and go. Move, skate, shoot, do everything.
Marcel Dion finished his career in New York City, but the Stanley Cup eluded him.
Missing the Stanley Cup, hey listen, I would love to. Every time I see it, I mean, I would love to, but you know what? I represent a lot of people that might come close but don't really achieve the top. I dream about that, but sooner or later you have to say, forget it, it's done.
But going out on a high was Marcel's style. In 1988, his 718th goal made him the NHL's second highest goal scorer, finishing behind only Gordie Howe.
When I was 5 years old, I find my mother hockey stick because my mother played many years ago in Russian hockey team. I play with stick every day, inside house, in outside too. I shoot the stone everywhere. I have very fun. And I like hockey very quick because the hockey is great sport.
You are not playing against Canada. You are not playing against NHL professionals. It was us versus them. It was the West versus the Soviet system. We are better, and we have to win.
In 1972, before the world ever heard the word glasnost, failure was unthinkable for Vladislav Tretiak, a Red Army officer, a goalkeeper written off by Canada's hockey spies as Junior B at best.
In 1972, before a super game in Montreal, because the first game we played Montreal Forum, everybody, Canadian people, the goalie, forward, people think Russian team very, very weak. And the goalie is 20 years old, no good, bad goalie too. And Jacques Plant, he come to my locker room, and he write the blackboard how you play Phil Esposito, Kornoyev, Frank Mahovlich. He helped me a little bit. It's very important for me because I'm very nervous.
The Canadians had expected an easy win, if not a rout. But almost from the start, things did not go according to plan. However, with 34 seconds remaining in the series, the Leafs' Paul Henderson tapped in the winning goal.
Last goal Paul Henderson for me, I remember all the time of my life because it's a good goal. I know possible stop the puck because it's a good goal.
By series end, the outcome was history, better left in peace. But the Russian Tretiak was the hero. Rumors were rife. Tretiak would like to play for Montreal.
There is no question that Vladislav's dream was to play in the NHL.
For me, very interesting play NHL. No possible play in Montreal Canadiens because in Soviet Union, in North America, America, USA, no friendship.
If he did ever express a desire to go to play for the Montreal Canadiens, he would have been considered a traitor. And there's no two ways about it.
Not surprisingly, Vladislav Tretiak stayed at home. Sadly, the NHL never did get to see him star on a Montreal lineup. Today, he's the Chicago Blackhawks goalkeeping coach.
He was the best, but he was the most completed goalie I never played against. So thank God he didn't play against us in the NHL.
Hockey wasn't the main topic. It was winter time. You got to put on your skates and you got to have fun out in the ice, and you stayed outside all the time in the fresh air. And you didn't hear, oh, it's 40 below, I'm not going out today. 40 below meant you put on an extra pair of socks in your skates and an extra scarf so that you didn't freeze. And within 15 minutes, it's maybe 30 below out, but you're skating and fooling around and playing hockey and everything like that. And next thing you know, some of the clothes are starting to come off because you're so hot.
Larry Robinson was a tough 6'4" defenseman born in Winchester, Ontario, and played junior hockey with Kitchener. Drafted by Sam Pollock's Montreal Canadiens, he spent a year with the Nova Scotia Voyageurs.
But I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I got to play with a great organization. I was, worked with every day with Claude Ruel and Al McNeil in Halifax.
For his solid play with the Voyageurs, Larry was soon rewarded.
I got a call and Al says, hey, you're going up to play in Montreal. And so the next morning I met Al and he told me, he said, hey, get out there, don't forget. He said, first shift, he said, just look for somebody and hammer.
And that's exactly what Larry Robinson did, earning himself 2 Norris trophies as the best defenseman in the league.
Larry was a big man, and he was a leader for that team, especially when he dropped the gloves and beat up on somebody else, but his own way. You had to intimidate or go after Larry Robinson for him to get him mad, and when he get mad, look out.
When Larry Robinson checked Gary Dornhofer, the hardest check I have ever seen. Larry gave Gary Dornhofer about a couple of feet along the boards to think he could get by, and just as he tried it, Larry Robinson just hammered it. And hammer is an appropriate word because they stopped the game and a maintenance man came out with a hammer and nailed the boards back into place. I'll never forget that. I was watching that. It was the best body check I've ever seen.
The game of hockey is a very intense sport. And if you just kind of loosey-goosey, you'll get by if you've got a lot of talent, but I don't know if I had a lot of talent, but I always worked hard and took a lot of pride in my work ethic and what I did on the ice. And to do that, you have to get a little aggressive.
Essentially, he was a tough, no-nonsense defenseman who helped the Habs to 4 straight Stanley Cups in the late 70s. But in his 17 years with the Canadiens, Robinson consistently showed his abilities as a rushing, attacking blue liner with the great knack of putting the puck in the back of the net.
I think that my career and being a hockey player was well worth it because everything that I have and my family has, I owe to the game of hockey. I think as much as we all complain about the salaries today as opposed to yesterday, I don't think there's any of us to a man that would change anything. Those are great times, and they're great memories that nobody can take away from us. And it's something that we can take with us and that people can talk about for years and years.
When I was a kid, I identified myself to Jean Béliveau, and because I was wearing number 4, I always wear number 4 when I was a kid, and for me, I was trying. Every time that I had the puck, I used to go and skate up and saying that Jean Béliveau is going up and he's taking a shot. And I tried to skate like him. I tried to make plays like him, but it didn't work all the time. Too bad.
For Guy Lafleur, as a little boy growing up in the small town of Thurso, Quebec, the weekends were spent playing shinny on the backyard rinks, sporting the number 4 jersey of his hero, Jean Béliveau. And in the evenings, he'd watch the Canadians on TV. Bedtime was simply an intrusion.
I was so anxious, to go and play the next day. So to not waste any time, I used to sneak up my equipment in the room and wait until my dad went to bed or was watching TV downstairs. And I used to dress up and sleep with my equipment on, except my skates. But to be ready the next day, and because I didn't have to really waste any time on getting dressed. So, and my dad used to wake me up sometime. At the beginning, he didn't know about it, but after a while, he was checking me up, because my mom caught me a few times and said that, what the hell is that, sleeping with your equipment on.
Guy Lafleur went on to dominate the game nationwide. He shattered all junior scoring records, and not surprisingly, he was Montreal's first choice in the '71 amateur draft.
We got in, they were announcing, Sam Pollock was announcing the #1 draft. So I was walking down the stairs and with our funny suits on, because everybody had funny suits in 1971. So I was really pleased, and you don't realize it very much when it happened, because it's like a dream come true. Well, everybody was expecting me to replace Jean Béliveau. At the beginning, I didn't really think about it, but as soon as we started a training camp and playing some games, I realized, what it really meant to the public, the Montreal Canadiens, and the players too. There was a lot of pressure.
I remember his first year, he had maybe 20 or 29 goals. And saying to myself, boy, they're talking a lot about this guy. I don't see anything special about him. And then all of a sudden, I think he started with a helmet, and then he took the helmet off. And, we started, scoring goals. And his game just seemed, every day just seemed to elevate.
When you feel that they have confidence in you, you find back the smile that you left 3-4 years ago.
The relief on Guy Lafleur's face reflected that his performance was blossoming. The critics were silenced. His 4th season, he hammered home 53 goals and received 66 assists. But he was only just beginning.
There was no finer sight during the years that I covered the Canadiens than to see Guy Lafleur in full flight. The blonde hairs, or the blonde mane as I call it, streaming behind him and coming down his wing, and then just letting a very, very good, hard, and accurate shot go, and boom, it's in the net.
My dad used to say, Rocket couldn't tell you how he scored a goal after he scored it. You know what? Neither could Lafleur. And the players from that team used to tell me, Scotty used to try to practice the power play, and he finally gave up because Lafleur couldn't. He would always foul it up somehow when they were trying to practice the systems. Let him go. Just let him go.
I just play by instinct, and if I played a game and I had to think on the ice, forget it. I wouldn't play a good game, and I couldn't think. That's why I was never good on breakaways.
I mean, if we tried to set up a play in practice and say, Guy, you had to do this and do that, he'd be the first guy to screw it up. Because that's just not his, he played off the seat of his pants. I mean, everything he did was done naturally.
I was playing with Peter, Steve Shutt, Lemaire, Pierre LaRouche, and I knew where they were without sometime looking at it. I just played the game like that all my career. And If the guy wasn't there, it was not my fault. He was supposed to be there, but maybe the guy was thinking too much.
Guy Lafleur's 14-year career with the Montreal Canadiens is stacked with honors. While Montreal were the dominant force in the National Hockey League in the late 70s, Guy Lafleur was the Canadiens' brightest star. 3 straight titles for highest scorer, 50 goals a season for 6 consecutive seasons, 6 straight 100-point-plus seasons, not forgetting 5 Stanley Cups. Guy Lafleur did it all.
It was a pleasure just to go to practice and be on the ice with him, because every day you saw something different. And I think that's the way it is with all, great players. With the Lemieux and the Gretzkys and Messiers and Coffeys, it's a treat to play with them. And Guy was just a treat to play with.
My main image of Guy Lafleur, after all the years I saw him play and all the goals I saw him score, is the fact that it didn't matter who they were playing, whether they were playing the Boston Bruins, who was, I think, their #1 rival, let's say, at the time, or the Colorado Rockies or the Kansas City Scouts. He never, ever changed his level of play. He never took a night off. It was just amazing.
A 100 years or more have passed since the brave and hardy stepped onto the ice to play their game. Little did they realize that hockey would become their king, and that a simple bowl, Lord Stanley's Cup, would be the crown that warriors would fight for. Through the years, across the centuries, divide and on, men and teams have battled hard to win that gilded jug. Men of steel who'd come and gone, troopers all who'd scaled the heights to victory. Heroes, men who held the torch aloft to light the way and cheer the new young blood that makes the game go on. Champions in the making. Legends of their time.